Mom, please, let's not go home tonight. The trembling plea from my 8-year-old son echoed in the cold night. It wasn't the whine of a tired child. It was a death knell, off-key and terrifying. I believed him, and that single decision to wrench the steering wheel away from our street that night saved us from a grave that had been dug for us in the middle of our own living room. Imagine the man who shared your bed, who stroked your hair night after night, was meticulously calculating the payout on your life insurance policy. Imagine the mother-in-law who attended church every Sunday, a rosary always in her hands, was the hidden director of a play, silently liquidating your assets, draining every cent of your hard-earned money to clear the stage for a perfectly staged accidental death. Burdened by debt, they wanted to wring the last drop of blood from me to build their new, filthy life. The door to our home that night was a gaping maw, a poisoned blade hidden beneath the veneer of a warm family. If I had walked through it, tomorrow's headlines would have been just another sad story. But a higher power had let my son see what he was never meant to see. When the velvet curtain of betrayal was ripped away, the soul-crushing pain froze into a shard of ice, sharp and lethal. The most dangerous monster wasn't lurking in the shadows. He wore the face of the person I loved most. He thought I was a lamb, meekly walking into his trap. He didn't know that a mother, when cornered, will rip out a predator's throat to protect her child. In this game of life and death, it was now my turn to deal the cards. Mom, please, let's not go home tonight. I had trusted my son, and that very decision saved us from a perfect plan. As the evidence slowly came to light, I understood that the most dangerous person in the world was the one who had slept beside me for years. The worn-out wipers of the old sedan scraped rhythmically across the windshield, their dry squeal a stark counterpoint to the drizzling rain. The digital clock on the dashboard blinked 11:45 p.m. Another 50 yards, and I would have made the familiar turn into our quiet, suburban cul-de-sac. Towards the house with the dark green shutters, towards the husband I had shared my life with, and the mother-in-law who spoke of nothing but faith and charity. After a grueling day at the hospital watching over my own mother post-surgery, my body was a wreck. My eyelids were leaden, and a dull ache radiated from my spine after 24 hours in a plastic waiting room chair. All I wanted was to walk through that door, peel off my clothes that reeked of antiseptic, and sink into my soft bed, holding my little boy who was fast asleep in the passenger seat. But just as my hand moved to flick the turn signal, a small, cold, sweat-drenched hand grabbed my wrist. The grip was so tight his small fingers dug through my sweater, sending a sharp sting through my skin. Mom. The thin, broken whisper came from the dry throat of Leo, my 8-year-old son. Startled, I tapped the brake and turned to look at him. In the jaundiced glow of the streetlights filtering through the glass, his face was chalky white, completely drained of blood. His eyes were wide, staring into the darkness of our street ahead, as if looking into the mouth of a monster waiting to devour us. He was shaking uncontrollably, his teeth chattering with a horrifying, clicking sound. "What is it, sweetie? Are you cold? I can turn down the AC," I said softly, reaching out to stroke his hair. But Leo flinched, curling into a ball in his seat. His gaze shifted from the dark street to me, a look I will never forget for the rest of my life. It wasn't the look of a child throwing a tantrum. It was the look of someone who had just stared death in the face. He swallowed hard, his pale lips trembling. The words came out as a broken whisper, lost in the pitter-patter of rain on the car roof. "Mom, please, don't go home tonight. I'm begging you, don't go home." My heart skipped a beat. My hand on the steering wheel froze. An icy chill shot up my spine to the crown of my head. A mother's intuition screamed that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Leo was a sensible, well-behaved boy who adored his father. He had never shown this kind of extreme panic about coming home. "Leo, look at me." I switched off the turn signal, shifted into park, and pulled the emergency brake. I turned my whole body to face him. "Tell me what happened. Did someone bully you? Did something happen at home this afternoon with Grandma and Dad?" He started to hyperventilate. His little fingers still clamped onto my sleeve as if letting go would make me disappear. Tears welled up, streaming down his cold cheeks. This afternoon, I was playing hide and seek. I hid in the coat closet in the living room, His voice was choked and fragmented. Grandma didn't know I was in there. Dad didn't know either. I heard Grandma telling Dad. Telling him what, sweetheart? I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible, even as my chest hammered like a war drum. Grandma said that tonight, when you get home, Dad has to make you that special tea, like the last few nights, so you'll sleep really deep. And then she told him to turn on the gas stove. Not to light it, just to turn the knobs. She said, "By morning, the whole house will explode." His voice cracked. Dad said the insurance money would be enough to buy a bigger house and for her to move in. Boom. A bolt of lightning tore across the sky, ripping the black night apart, and in the same instant, ripping apart my entire world, my entire belief system, and the last shred of strength I had left. My ears rang, a sharp whine piercing my eardrums, drowning out the rain and the engine's hum. The air in the car was suddenly sucked out, leaving me gasping for breath, my chest constricting in a pain so intense it felt like 1,000 needles were stabbing me. Turn on the gas. Explode. Insurance money. For her to move in. The words, spoken by an innocent 8-year-old, pieced together a perfect death sentence meant for me. I stared into the void ahead. The dark green shutters of our house were still faintly visible through the rain. Inside that house, in the familiar kitchen where I cooked every day, was a gas stove that Ethan, my husband, had been complaining about for weeks, saying the valve was loose. I remembered the dark, herbal tea, the one with the strange, earthy smell that my mother-in-law, Margaret, had started brewing for me 3 weeks ago. "You look so pale lately, dear. I got some special herbs for you. Helps with sleep and anxiety. A woman can't be losing sleep, it's bad for your health." Her voice then was so gentle, so kind, accompanied by the serene smile of a woman who quoted scripture daily. I drank it. And it was true. Every night after drinking it, I would fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, waking up groggy and disoriented. Ethan was always the one who lovingly brought the cup to our bedroom, watched me drink it all, and then took the cup away to wash it. And the life insurance policy? Just 3 months ago, Ethan had suddenly brought home a friend who was an insurance agent. He had used the sweetest, most caring words to convince me to sign. "My business has so many risks, honey, and you've been getting sick so often. This is just to make sure that if anything ever happens to either of us, the other one and Leo are taken care of. It's our responsibility as parents, you know." I had been so blind. I had signed as the insured person, with a death benefit reaching into the millions. The sole beneficiary, Ethan Miller. All those random details, those seemingly harmless fragments of daily family life, now, under the whisper of a child, snapped together into a picture so cruel and blood-soaked it made my soul freeze. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. They were trembling, not from the cold outside, but a tremor deep within every cell, an uncontrollable physiological reaction when a person realizes they have just sidestepped the abyss by a hair's breadth. If I had gone home tonight, if Leo hadn't insisted on coming to the hospital with me this afternoon and hadn't happened to hide in that closet, what would have happened? I would have walked into the house, exhausted. Ethan would have greeted me with his usual loving smile. He would have handed me the cup of calming tea. I would have drunk it and fallen into a dreamless sleep in my own bed. While I was completely unconscious, that man would have silently walked downstairs, turned the knobs on the gas stove. The gas would slowly seep out, filling every cubic inch of the sealed house. Then, a single spark, perhaps from the refrigerator cycling on, or a preset light switch would trigger the explosion. Tomorrow, the local news would run the headline, "Tragic family accident, gas leak leads to fatal house explosion." People would feel pity for the grieving husband, the child who lost his mother. No one would suspect an accident. No one would perform an autopsy to find sedatives in the stomach of a victim burned beyond recognition. And then, the massive insurance payout would be released, flowing directly into the pocket of a murderer, paving the way for him and his mistress to build a new life on the ashes of my bones. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. I had to cover my mouth, forcing down the bitter taste of bile. My tears wouldn't fall. Strangely, in this moment so close to death, The initial panic suddenly froze over. An arctic cold spread through my chest, crystallizing every weak emotion, every blind love I had ever felt for the man I called my husband. Leo. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I wrapped my arm around my son's trembling shoulders, pulling him into a hug. I heard you. I believe you. We are not going home tonight. He clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably. The raw, terrified cries of a child whose sense of safety had been stolen from him in his own home. I stroked his back, my eyes fixed like daggers on the darkness ahead. My hand reached for the gear shift, yanking it down to R. The car let out a low growl and slowly reversed, moving away from the cul-de-sac, away from the green shutters, away from the grave that those I called family had so diligently dug for me. Once on the main road, I shifted to D and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car shot forward into the night, leaving behind 10 years of my youth, a decade of deception, leaving behind a marriage that was, in reality, a grotesque horror show. I drove aimlessly through the deserted streets of suburban Chicago. The rain grew heavier. Neon lights from closed storefronts reflected on the wet pavement, shattering into 1,000 blinding shards. My mind was racing at an impossible speed. I started to reevaluate everything, every glance, every gesture, every word from Ethan and Margaret over the past 6 months, replaying in my mind with terrifying clarity. I remembered the nights Ethan would toss and turn, taking his phone to the bathroom for long periods. When I asked, he would just give a weary smile. "Things are crazy at work, honey. Just texting with a supplier about a shipment stuck at the port." I remembered Margaret's passive-aggressive comments about how I didn't know how to make real money, even though every single living expense in that house, from the mortgage and utilities to the groceries and Leo's private school tuition, was paid for by my salary as an architect. Ethan always claimed his business was struggling, always in debt. And Margaret, the devout mother-in-law with a rosary always in hand, was the one who came up with the idea. "Let me hold on to your savings account, dear. Women can be so frivolous with money. This way, if Ethan ever needs capital for his business, we have something to fall back on." How could I have been so stupid? I had handed over the entire $300,000, money I had worked my fingers to the bone for, staying up all night on drafting projects, to her. I had let Ethan's name be added to the deed of the house my own parents had given me the down payment for, all because of his sweet words, "We're a team, honey. Whose name is on it doesn't matter. You being so calculative makes me sad." They had been planning to drain my finances for a long time. And when there was nothing left to take, they targeted my life with that insurance policy. A calculation so cold, so meticulous, it was bone-chilling. The car sped over a bridge, crossing the dark, churning waters of the river below. Wind howled through the gaps in the window sills. Leo had fallen asleep, exhausted by fear. He was using my jacket as a pillow, occasionally twitching in his sleep, his small eyebrows knitted together. Looking at him, a primal rage erupted inside me. It wasn't the kind of anger that makes you scream or break things. It was a cold, black, smoldering fire that incinerated the last remnants of kindness and naivety in my soul. He wanted to kill me, fine, but he made a fatal mistake. He let my son witness his filth. He forced an 8-year-old boy to endure the most horrific psychological trauma of his life. With a mother, you can take her money. You can trample on her dignity. But if you touch her child's safety, you have awakened a beast. The clock showed 2:15 a.m. I pulled over on a deserted stretch of highway on the city's outskirts, miles from the affluent suburb where we lived. In front of me was a run-down motel. The neon sign, flickering the words Roseb Bud Motel, was half burnt out. I couldn't go to a major hotel where they would ask for my ID and log my stay in their system. I needed a place to disappear, a place no one would look. I carried Leo in my arms, covering his head with my jacket, and rushed through the rain to the reception desk. A middle-aged man, bleary-eyed from sleep, glanced at our disheveled state without a word. He took the $100 bill from my hand and tossed a room key with a grimy red plastic tag onto the counter. The room smelled of dampness, cheap cigarette smoke, and a lingering scent of harsh laundry detergent on sheets that were never truly clean. A fluorescent light flickered erratically before casting a sickly glow on the stained, peeling wallpaper. I gently laid Leo on the bed and covered him with the thin blanket. He curled up, his hands still clutching the hem of his shirt. Only when the door was closed, the deadbolt and chains securely fastened, did I allow myself to slide down to the cold linoleum floor. I sat huddled in a corner, my back against the crumbling wall. The silence was terrifying, broken only by the sound of rain against the grimy window and Leo's steady breathing. Trembling, I took my phone out of my coat pocket. The lock screen lit up. No missed calls, no frantic texts. This silence was more terrifying than 100 calls. A normal husband, waiting for his wife to come home in a storm, would have called relentlessly. But Ethan didn't call. Because he thought I was on my way home. He didn't want to raise any alarms. He was sitting in the darkness of our house, patiently waiting for the prey to walk into his trap. Suddenly, the screen buzzed. A new text from Ethan. My heart seized. I swiped the screen open. "Hey honey, where are you? Be careful driving in the rain. I left the front door unlocked. Just push it open. I heated up a bowl of that mushroom soup you like on the stove. Come home and eat it while it's warm, then get some sleep. Love you." I stared at the words. Mushroom soup. Not the herbal tea. He had changed his tactic. Or he had hidden that damn drug in the mushroom soup, my favorite. The sweet, caring words, ending with "love you," now looked like the venomous fangs of a smiling snake. I took a deep breath. The musty air of the cheap motel filled my lungs, bringing with it a cold, hard clarity. I didn't reply. I turned off my Wi-Fi and data, and put the phone in airplane mode. I needed time. I needed space to reevaluate this entire chessboard. It was now 3:45 a.m. I stood up and walked into the tiny bathroom. The dim, yellow light illuminated my face in the spotty mirror. I looked at my reflection. A 32-year-old woman, gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes, her hair a damp, tangled mess. This was the face of a victim, a weak person easily manipulated, easily fooled, who had almost lost her life without even knowing why. I turned on the faucet and splashed handfuls of icy water on my face. The cold stung my skin but shocked my mind into full alertness. I looked up at the mirror again. Water streamed down my face, over my nose, dripping from my chin. I looked directly into my own eyes in the mirror. They were bloodshot. The initial panic and fear were completely gone, replaced by a terrifying calm. The calm of the ocean before a superstorm hits. He thought I was a meek little lamb. He thought my son and I were puppets in a murder plot directed by him and his mother. He thought everything would go according to his perfect script. But he didn't know that tonight, the wheels of fate had veered off course. I pulled a paper towel from the dispenser and dried my face. My movements slow and deliberate. I couldn't keep running. If I just took Leo and disappeared, I would leave with nothing. My assets, my hard-earned money, my house, all of it would legally fall into the hands of those demons. Not only that, a man who would plot to kill his wife for insurance money would never let me go that easily. He would play the part of the pitiful husband, abandoned by his wife. Or worse, he would find a way to eliminate me at another time, in another setting, to silence me forever and continue his grift. To defeat a devil, you can't use tears or pleas for mercy. You have to become a devil more ruthless, more cunning, and 100,000 times more cold-blooded than he is. I walked out of the bathroom and over to the bed to look at Leo. He was sleeping soundly, his breathing even, but his brow was still furrowed. I leaned down and placed a soft kiss on his forehead. His forehead was cool, but my kiss was a vow. "I will not let anyone hurt you, Leo. Not a single soul. Tomorrow morning, at dawn, I would have to go back to that house. I would have to walk past the dark green shutters. I would have to face the two people who wanted to take my life. I would have to put on the mask of a dutiful wife, a respectful daughter-in-law. I would have to give the greatest performance of my life. Not a single flicker of suspicion in my eyes. Not a single furrow of my brow. I would have to smile at the man who wanted to kill me. I would have to swallow my disgust and live among them, to gather every piece of evidence, every recording, every receipt of their asset stripping. I would have to unmask them myself, drag them into the light of the law, and make them pay for every single beat of my son's terrified heart tonight. The clock struck 4:15 a.m. The game of survival had begun. They had played their first hand and missed, and now, this round was mine to control. The dark, velvet curtain of the Miller family, I would tear it to shreds from the inside. The pale light of dawn filtered through the cheap motel curtains, casting long, gray streaks across the rumpled bedsheets. I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, my eyes fixed on the empty space before me, feeling every second tick by. 6:15 a.m. It was time to go back. I turned to look at Leo. He had been awake for some time, his big, dark eyes watching me silently. A faint mist of the previous night's terror still clouded their depths. He didn't cry or demand anything. An almost heartbreaking maturity for a child who sensed the danger surrounding his mother. I took a deep breath, forcing the cold air deep into my lungs to keep my voice from shaking. I pulled Leo into my arms, smoothed his messy hair, and whispered the instructions I had rehearsed in my head 100 times over the last 2 hours. I taught my son how to lie. For the first time in my life, I taught my 8-year-old child how to wear a mask. I told him that if Grandma or Dad asked, he was only to say that my car broke down on a dark road, my phone died, and we had to stay at a friend's house. He was not to mention what he saw or heard, not to mention the whispered plea that had saved both our lives. Leo nodded, his small arms wrapping tightly around my neck. That hug was the only shield I had before walking into the lion's den. The car turned into the familiar cul-de-sac. Everything was the same. The smell of bacon from a neighbor's kitchen, the clatter of the garbage truck down the street, the distant bark of a dog. It was all so normal, so mundane, a deceptive normality masking a lethal trap. When the car stopped in front of the house with the dark green shutters, the place I had called home for 7 years, my stomach twisted into a knot. Waves of nausea washed over me. I turned off the engine and closed my eyes for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. When I opened them again, the terrified, weak woman from last night was locked away in the deepest part of my soul. Behind the wheel now was only a machine, programmed for survival. I opened the car door and helped Leo out. The click of the front gate latch echoed in the morning quiet. As the gate swung open, the first thing I saw was Margaret, my mother-in-law, watering the orchids hanging along the porch. She was wearing a plum-colored silk pantsuit, her hair perfectly coiffed in a bun held by a jade pin. She always exuded the calm, dignified air of a devout, church-going woman, a perfect camouflage that had fooled me for years. Hearing the noise, she turned. For a fraction of a second, I saw it, shock, a flash of disappointment and coldness in her narrow eyes. It was so fast that the me of yesterday would have dismissed it as a trick of the light. Last night's plan had failed. The prey was not supposed to be standing here at this hour, completely unharmed. The hand holding the hose tightened, her bony knuckles turning white, but instantly, her lips stretched into a practiced, loving smile. "Oh my goodness, where have you two been all night?" Ethan and I were worried sick. We called and called, but your phone went straight to voicemail. Ethan stayed up all night waiting for you. Her voice was sweet and even, but with an underlying sharpness that pricked at my ears. I walked forward, my face arranged into an expression of weary apology that I had carefully rehearsed. I lowered my voice, feigning immense regret. "I'm so sorry, Mom. My car died on a back road last night, and my phone was dead. The rain was so bad, I couldn't get a rideshare. So I had to call a friend who lives nearby to pick us up, and we crashed at her place. I just borrowed a charger this morning, called a tow truck, and rushed Leo back here." As I spoke, I discreetly watched every micro-expression on her face. Her eyes scanned me like a security checkpoint, from my slightly disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes to the dark circles under my eyes. She was searching for a crack in my story, trying to determine if I had genuinely had car trouble or if I knew something. I stood still, letting her scrutinize my fabricated exhaustion, my hands holding Leo's shoulders. "Is that so? You poor things. Well, come inside, wash up, and I'll heat up some oatmeal for you," she said, her tone softening. "But next time, you must find a way to call home. It's dangerous for a woman and child to be out all night, you know." She emphasized the word dangerous, her eyes locking onto mine, a veiled threat disguised as concern. I smiled faintly, and nodded obediently. Yes, I will. Stepping over the threshold into the living room, a cold, heavy air hit me. The faint scent of incense from the prayer corner, mixed with Margaret's signature scent of menthol balm, created a suffocating atmosphere. Every brick in this house, every piece of heavy oak furniture, every curtain, had been paid for with my blood, sweat, and tears from nights spent hunched over architectural plans and days I exhausted myself at the firm. Yet, somehow, I had become a guest in my own home. A guest who had to watch the host's mood just to breathe. Margaret followed me into the kitchen, her slippers shuffling ominously on the tile floor. She opened the fridge, took out a container of marinated steak, and turned to me, her gaze back to its usual cold, calculating state. "Oh, that reminds me. If you have time this afternoon, stop by the bank and withdraw $50,000. Your father-in-law's memorial is coming up, and I want to host a large charity luncheon at the club. Plus, the roof over the sunroom is leaking again. I've already called a contractor." I froze for a beat. 50,000. Last week, she'd taken 30,000 for holistic health supplements. The month before, it was 100,000 to invest in a friend's organic grocery business, a store I'd never seen. The script was always the same. She would invent 1,000 legitimate-sounding reasons to bleed me dry. If I ever refused or even questioned her, she would burst into tears, threaten to move back to Florida, and accuse me of being a stingy daughter-in-law who looked down on her husband's family. Ethan, my perfect husband, would then appear at the perfect moment, sigh dramatically, hug his mother, and give me a look of profound disappointment. He'd lecture me with platitudes like, "Money is just an object. Honey, how much longer does Mom have? Why are you so calculative?" In the end, I would always bite the bullet and transfer the money to buy a fragile, temporary peace. But that was the me of yesterday. A fool trapped in a cage of moral obligation they had woven themselves. I slowly turned to face Margaret. Suppressing a wave of nausea, I maintained a calm expression, deliberately making my voice sound weary from a sleepless night. "Okay, Mom, I'll see if I can get to the bank this afternoon. Things are a bit tight at the firm right now, end of the quarter, and my personal accounts are temporarily frozen for an audit. It'll probably be early next week before I can withdraw anything." Margaret stopped, the hand mixing the steak marinade freezing midair. Her thin, tattooed eyebrows knitted together, forming a deep furrow on her forehead. She was not used to me refusing, not even delaying. In the unspoken laws of this house, my money was our money, and she held the key to the vault. "Frozen? What do you mean frozen? I thought you just landed that big commercial contract. Don't you lie to me. A woman with too much cash on hand just gets into trouble," she snapped. "Just give it to me to manage. It's not like I'd waste it. Or are you building a secret stash to give to your side of the family?" Her voice grew shrill, and she slammed a metal spoon on the granite countertop with a sharp clang. Usually, this would send me into a panic, desperately trying to prove my innocence by showing her my banking app. But today, I just stood there, calmly looking at the raw meat. "What are you talking about, Mom? Why would I hide anything? The firm's finances are complicated. You wouldn't understand. Why don't you use some of your savings for the luncheon for now? As soon as my funds are released next week, I'll pay you back immediately." My voice was soft but firm. Margaret stared at me, her chest heaving. She was analyzing my attitude. This soft but impenetrable resistance was a variable she hadn't anticipated. Her eyes, sharp as razors, swept over my face for the second time that morning. She was wondering if this little lamb was starting to grow horns, or if she was genuinely just tired. After a few tense, suffocating seconds, she snorted and turned away abruptly. "Fine, do as you please. I'm just an old woman, living off her daughter-in-law's charity. Every penny I ask for is a humiliation. When Ethan gets home, you can explain it to him yourself." She used Ethan as her shield, her ultimate weapon. I turned and walked up the stairs without another word. The wooden steps creaked under my feet like the groaning of a trap waiting to spring. I knew this financial battle was just the opening act. Margaret's control in this house extended far beyond bank accounts. It seeped into every corner, every meal, every night's sleep. I entered our master bedroom. The large room, decorated in warm, inviting tones, now felt like a cold tomb. I went straight to the oak wardrobe and opened the bottom drawer. This was where I used to keep the deed to this house, a house in my name, purchased before our marriage. 3 years ago, Margaret had sweetly convinced me to give her the deed to store in her safe for safekeeping, citing a string of petty burglaries in the neighborhood. I had obediently handed it over without a second thought. Looking back now, it was part of the comprehensive dispossession plan they had orchestrated long ago. They didn't just want my cash, they wanted to swallow this entire asset. And the only way to legally possess it without a divorce settlement was to make me a dead woman. I slammed the drawer shut. A furious rage burned in my chest, searing my nerves. But I bit my lip until I tasted blood to stop myself from smashing everything in sight. I had to be patient. I had to be colder, more careful than them. The afternoon passed in a suffocatingly thick atmosphere. I deliberately took a day off work, using fatigue as an excuse to silently observe everything. Margaret kept herself busy in the kitchen, but I knew her eyes and ears were always pointed toward my room. Around 3 p.m., I heard her slippers shuffling toward my door. Through the slightly ajar door, I saw her in the hallway, beckoning to Leo. He was playing with Legos in the living room and slowly walked over when she called. I held my breath, hiding behind the door, straining to hear. "Leo, come here. Grandma has a little secret to ask you." Margaret's voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she always used when trying to pry information from him. "Yes, Grandma?" Leo's voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. "Where did you and Mommy go last night?" "Mommy said the car broke down." "Did she call anyone? Which friend's house did you stay at? Was it Aunt Jessica? Or Aunt Emily?" she asked in a rapid-fire succession. Her rough hand reached out to pat his head, but her fingers gripped his shoulder tightly. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms, drawing blood. If Leo slipped up, if he got confused and mentioned us parking in front of the house, everything would be over. Neither of us would walk out of this house alive. I was about to burst out, but then Leo's voice, perfectly clear and innocent, rang out. "The car broke down in a really dark place, Grandma. I was scared. Mom's phone was totally dead." Then she flagged down a taxi. The taxi driver took us to a friend's house. I don't remember her name, the chubby one who always gives me candy. Mom just brought me home this morning. I let out a silent sigh of relief, a cold sweat breaking out down my back. My son, an 8-year-old boy, was being forced to play a game of life and death with his own grandmother. Margaret was silent for a few seconds, her breathing heavy. It was clear she got nothing out of him. She released his shoulder and clicked her tongue. "Is that so? Well, go on and play then. And remember, children should never, ever lie to adults. Liars get their tongues cut out, you know." She turned and went downstairs. I slowly slid to the floor, clutching my chest, which ached from holding my breath. They were backing us into a corner. Her control wasn't just about money. She wanted to control whether we lived or died. Late afternoon, the sun began to set, shadows creeping up the weathered walls of the house. I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. It was the same face, but the eyes had changed. The submissive, long-suffering woman had died last night. Now, every blink was a calculation. The familiar sound of a car engine came from outside the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, the solid thud of a car door. It was Ethan, my husband, the man who had shared my bed for 7 years, the man who had blown out birthday candles with our son, and the man who had meticulously planned to have me killed for a $20 million life insurance policy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened them, I smiled at my reflection, the perfect, gentle, long-suffering smile of a good wife. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked out of the room. The greatest performance of my life facing the devil himself was about to begin. Ethan's footsteps echoed on the familiar marble stairs. For 7 years, I had known that rhythm by heart. Every time the sole of his leather shoe touched the floor, my heart used to leap with loving anticipation. But this evening, The sound was as jarring and cold as a hammer striking the lid of a half-closed coffin. The heavy oak door swung open. Ethan walked in, loosening his gray tie and draping it over the arm of the sofa. A gesture as practiced and elegant as always. The scent of his masculine cologne, mixed with the sterile air of his car and a faint whiff of city smog, filled the room. My chest tightened, but the smile on my lips was perfectly framed. "You're home. Was traffic bad?" I stepped forward to take the leather briefcase from his hand. The strap felt rough and cold against my palm. Ethan looked up at me. His eyes, those deep-set eyes I once thought held all the peace in the world, flickered over my face for a second. Just a second. But in that moment, with the heightened senses of a cornered animal, I caught a murky glint in their depths. It was scrutiny, a masterfully concealed disappointment. He was disappointed that I was still standing here, alive and smiling, instead of lying under the wheels of a truck on some deserted highway last night. "Traffic was hell," Ethan said, his voice a low, warm baritone, the same smooth tone that had soothed me through so many storms. He raised a hand, his long fingers touching my cheek. "Mom told me your car broke down last night. Why didn't you call me? I woke up this morning and you were both gone. Your phone was off. I was about to lose my mind before I called your mom and found out you were at a friend's." The lie was so perfect it was chilling. The skin on my cheek felt like it was burning under his touch. But I didn't pull away. I leaned into his palm, rubbing my cheek against the hand of the man who was plotting my murder, and let out a soft, pouty sigh. "I tried calling you a few times, but it said you were busy. Then my phone died. It was so dark, and Leo was starting to panic. Luckily, I flagged down a taxi and just went to my friend Ashley's. I had to borrow a charger this morning to call a garage to tow the car." I lied smoothly, my eyes wide, looking directly into his without blinking. Survival teaches you to act better than any movie star. Ethan pulled his hand back, a faint smile playing on his lips, a smile that, in the past, I would have interpreted as him feeling sorry for my ordeal. But now, I knew it was the smirk of a man recalculating his failed move. "So, what was wrong with the car? Did the garage say?" His voice was steady, betraying no emotion. "They said something about the brake line snapping or the caliper being stuck." "You know, I don't understand that mechanical stuff," I replied, my voice laced with feigned helplessness. "It was lucky I was driving slow. The car just gradually lost power and stopped. If I had been on the freeway when the brakes failed, I don't think Leo and I would be here to see you now." I let the sentence hang, delivering each word slowly, my eyes welling up with fake tears. I saw Ethan's Adam's apple bob, a tiny, involuntary sign of tension. He pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping tightly around my shoulders. That embrace, once my safest place on earth, now felt like the coils of a giant python squeezing its prey. "Don't say that. I'm here now. Tomorrow, I'm calling that garage owner and giving him a piece of my mind. The car was just serviced last month, and now the brakes fail? Unacceptable. Now, go take a shower and we'll have dinner. I'm starving." Ethan patted my back, released me, and walked upstairs. I stood frozen in the living room, watching his straight back, his crisp white shirt, his broad shoulders. Everything about him was so polished, so perfect, it was terrifying. "Service last month." Those words echoed in my head like a siren. That's right, Ethan himself had taken my car for service. The car I used every day to take our son to school, to soccer practice. He was willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood to create a perfect, untraceable accident. Dinner was a silent, suffocating affair, the kind of silence I once naively called domestic peace. Margaret sat at the head of the table, leisurely picking at her salad, occasionally shooting sharp glances at me and Leo. Leo kept his head down, quietly eating his rice. He was unusually subdued. Since overhearing that conversation, Leo had barely spoken. An 8-year-old had been forced to learn how to swallow his terror along with his food. Ethan placed a piece of grilled salmon on my plate, carefully picking out the tiny bones. "Eat up. You look so pale lately. You need to take care of yourself. Our anniversary trip to Hawaii is next month, remember?" The piece of fish sat on my white porcelain plate, its juices seeping into the rice. I looked at it, and a violent wave of nausea churned in my stomach. A meal served by a murderer? Was he trying to fatten the lamb before the slaughter, or was he determined to play the role of the perfect husband until the very end? I mechanically scooped up a forkful of rice and fish and chewed. The saltiness of the seasoning, the flakiness of the fish, mixed with the bitter taste of my own saliva. "Yes, I'll try to eat more," I said, forcing a smile and swallowing the food that felt like poison in my stomach. After dinner, Ethan went into his home office. That was his private sanctuary, a place I was only allowed to enter to bring him a glass of orange juice or to empty his ashtray. Otherwise, the soundproof door remained firmly shut. I cleared the dishes. The sound of running water in the sink mingled with Margaret's dramatic sighs from the living room. I washed each plate, each piece of silverware, as slowly as possible, buying time for my overwrought mind to piece everything together. I needed proof. An overheard conversation wasn't enough. The testimony of an 8-year-old held no legal weight. And with Ethan's money and influence, he could easily paint me as a paranoid, mentally unstable wife trying to slander him. $20 million. An astronomical sum. I had signed that policy 6 months ago, swayed by Ethan's sweet reassurances that it was to secure Leo's future, just in case. I had signed without reading the fine print, without noticing who the sole beneficiary was. Late at night, the large house was submerged in a thick, oppressive darkness. The pale glow of the streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting faint stripes across the gray bedsheets. Ethan lay with his back to me, his breathing even and rhythmic. He had an uncanny ability to fall asleep the moment his head hit the pillow, the deep, peaceful sleep of someone with no conscience. I lay with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The silence of the night exposed everything. For 7 years, I had lived with his cold silence, but I had always excused it as the nature of a mature man burdened by his career. Now I understood. It wasn't stoicism or work pressure. It was the silence of a cold-blooded predator. He didn't share his joys or sorrows, didn't complain or get angry, because in his eyes, I was not a partner. I was a tool, a puppet, and ultimately, a commodity with a liquidation value of $20 million. The bedside clock blinked 2:15 a.m. The time was right. I took a slow, silent breath, holding it in my chest. I inched my way out from under the thin comforter. With every millimeter of movement, I focused on Ethan's breathing, on the subtle shift of the mattress springs. I placed one foot on the cold hardwood floor. The chill shot up from my soul to my spine, jolting all my senses. I stood up, still as a statue, for a full minute to confirm he was still sound asleep. Then, I tiptoed to the valet stand in the corner. The navy blazer Ethan had worn to work was hanging there. Ethan was meticulous. His primary phone was always locked with Face ID and a complex passcode, never leaving his side. But a man planning something as elaborate as a staged car accident wouldn't use his main phone to communicate with his accomplice or mistress. There had to be another device, something he kept hidden but always close. My hand trembled as I slid it into the left breast pocket of the blazer. Empty, except for a pen cap. I moved to the right pocket. My fingers brushed against a hard, rectangular object with a metal edge. My blood ran cold. I slowly pulled it out. A slim, black burner phone, with no case. Clutching the phone, I tiptoed to the bathroom, closing the door most of the way to prevent the screen's light from escaping. I turned it on. The bright, bluish light was blinding in the dark. It asked for a 6-digit passcode. My mind raced. Ethan's birthday? Too obvious. Leo's birthday? Our anniversary? I tried 081516. Our wedding date. The phone vibrated slightly. Incorrect passcode. My heart pounded. Too many wrong tries and it would lock me out. I closed my eyes, digging through my memory for any significant numbers Ethan used. Bank pins? The safe combination? Luggage locks? They all used the same, seemingly random sequence. 411989. It wasn't anyone's birthday. Ethan once told me it was the license plate number of the first motorcycle he ever bought. Holding my breath, my fingers shaking, I typed it in. 041989. The screen changed, unlocked. I covered my mouth to stifle a sob. The betrayer's fortress had been breached by his own meticulous habits. The phone's interface was bare, just a few basic apps. No Facebook, no social media, no personal email. I tapped on the messages. There was only one conversation thread, with an unsaved number. I opened it. The screen's light illuminated my face, revealing every word, every line that was tearing apart the last vestiges of my faith in humanity. May 12th. Unknown number. The policy on your wife is past the 90-day contestability period. The accidental death clause is now in full effect. Just act natural from here on out. Ethan. Got it. I'm scouting the route she takes Leo to school. There's a stretch of road with no security cameras. It's perfect. May 28th. Unknown number. Does the old hag at home suspect anything? Ethan. My mother despises her. She can't wait to get rid of her so you can move in. But Mom doesn't know about the insurance plan. The more she berates Amelia, the better. It creates psychological stress. If she has an accident due to distracted driving, it'll seem perfectly normal. Hot, salty tears streamed down my face, splashing onto the phone screen. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners in crime, turning me into a fattened calf being led to the slaughter. The person with the unknown number, the one with the sharp voice I'd heard through the car window last night, was his mistress, and clearly someone who knew about insurance. They had calculated every day, every hour, every one of my routines. The cruelty wasn't in a moment of passion. It was in the patient, pathological planning over months. I scrolled to the most recent messages. The words were like needles stabbing my retinas. 2 days ago, unknown number. This Friday, she has to drive upstate for that client meeting, right? The highway up there is under construction and deserted. Have you taken care of the car? Ethan. I loosened the bolts on the front brake caliper and partially severed the brake line. It'll feel fine driving around town, but on the highway, if she has to brake hard, it'll snap completely. Don't worry, the pig is ready for slaughter. After this, the 20 million is enough for us to start over in Australia, just like we planned. Last night, after my panicked call to him, Ethan, damn it, the plan is ruined. She texted that the car died on a county road. I called back, but her phone is off. I don't know if it was a real accident or if she called a mechanic. Unknown number. Calm down. Find out what she knows. If a mechanic finds the artificial cut, we're in big trouble. You need to clean up the scene immediately. I bit down hard on the back of my hand, drawing blood, to keep from screaming. The pig is ready for slaughter. That's what my husband, the man I shared my life with, the man I sacrificed my career for, called me. He didn't care that Leo, his own son, would be in that car. Or maybe he had calculated that, too. Sacrificing the child would make the tragedy even more heart-wrenching, more perfect, leaving the insurance company with no room for doubt. One stone, two birds. He would shed his entire past and run off with his mistress and the money. I wiped my tears away. The weakness, the pain, the sorrow were all incinerated in the inferno of my rage. All that remained was the chilling cold of a glacier. I took out my own phone, put it on silent, turned off the flash, and meticulously photographed every single text message screen, every word, every punctuation mark. Once done, I opened a secure cloud app on my phone, created a hidden folder, and uploaded all the images. I also sent a copy to a secret email address I had created that afternoon. Then, I cleared the access history on the burner phone and locked the screen. Suddenly, I heard a rustle from the bedroom, the creak of mattress springs. Amelia, honey, where are you? Ethan's sleepy, thick voice called out from the darkness. My heart stopped. Every pore on my body opened, and a cold sweat drenched my pajamas. He was awake. If he walked in now and saw me with his secret phone, he wouldn't hesitate to strangle me right here and stage it as a slip and fall in the shower. I was frozen in the pitch-black bathroom, unable to return the phone to his blazer. In a flash of panic, I shoved the burner phone deep into my pajama pocket, grabbed a towel from the rack, and turned on the sink faucet to a low trickle. I'm here. I forced my voice to sound sleepy and weak. My stomach is killing me. I think that fish at dinner was a little off. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor, heavy and deliberate, coming toward the bathroom. Through the crack in the door, I saw his shadow lengthen across the floor. He pushed the door open slightly. The dim, yellow light from the bedside lamp cast his face in shadow, his eyes sleepy but sharp and alert. "Stomach ache? Do you need some Pepto-Bismol?" he asked, his eyes quickly scanning me, lingering on the towel in my hand, then flicking to the running water. No, I'm okay. I think I just needed to, It's probably just stress from the car situation yesterday making my stomach act up. As I spoke, I hung the towel back on the rack and slowly walked out of the bathroom, brushing past him. As my shoulder grazed his chest, I felt the tension in his muscles. He was watching my every move. I got back into bed and turned my back to him, my hand hidden under the thick comforter, clutching the burner phone in my pocket. Ethan stood in the doorway of the bathroom for a long moment. The silence in the room was thick and suffocating. I knew he was thinking, evaluating my words for any inconsistencies. Finally, he turned off the water, closed the bathroom door, and came back to bed. He lay down beside me. The warmth of his body, the familiar scent of his skin, now smelled of death. He reached out, his arm wrapping around my waist, pulling me close. "Go to sleep, honey. Don't overthink things. I'm here to take care of everything," he whispered, his hot breath on my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my own breathing to become slow and even. "Okay, you get some sleep too." For the rest of the long night, I lay motionless in the devil's embrace. I counted his heartbeats, counted every second that passed until his breathing settled back into the rhythm of deep sleep. It was 4 a.m. Once again, with extreme, agonizing slowness, I retrieved the phone from my pocket, crept over to the valet stand, and placed it back in the right pocket of his blazer, smoothing the fabric to erase any trace of my intrusion. When I returned to bed, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. The first rays of a new day pierced through the curtains, tearing the darkness apart. I lay there, my eyes wide and dry, staring at the ceiling. Ethan thought he was herding a fattened pig to the slaughter. He, his mistress, and his wicked mother thought they had woven a perfect net, but they didn't know that last night, when those text messages exposed their filthy truth, the submissive, naive wife named Amelia had died. The woman lying next to him now was a woman who held his death sentence in her hands. From this moment on, in this game of survival, I would be the one making the rules. I wouldn't just walk out of this hell with my son. I would light the match myself and burn their perfect family facade to the ground, piece by piece, slowly, and without mercy. The coldest revenge is letting your enemy believe they are winning until the very last second. The alarm on the bedside table blared. 6 a.m. The shrill, steady sound was like the rhythmic tapping of an executioner's hammer. I opened my eyes. There was no grogginess, no dreamy haze of someone just waking up. My eyes had been wide open since 4 a.m. For 2 hours, I had simply lain there, listening to the breathing of the man beside me, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. Ethan stirred, stretching, one large arm flopping across my waist. The warmth of his skin seeped through the thin fabric of my pajamas. This was the same warmth I had reveled in, had trusted completely just days ago. Now, it made the hair on my skin stand on end. A wave of nausea rose in my throat, a visceral reaction to being in contact with something so utterly profane. I had to clench my stomach muscles and grind my teeth to keep from gagging. "Morning, honey." Ethan's voice was low and gravelly with sleep. He nuzzled his face into the back of my neck, inhaling deeply. "How are you feeling today? Stomach settled down?" A perfectly caring question, a model husband down to the last detail. If it weren't for last night, for the black phone in his blazer pocket, I might have turned, wrapped my arms around his neck, and burrowed my head into his chest, like an obedient kitten. But now, beneath his solicitous tone, I could clearly hear the cold, calculating query of a predator checking to see if its prey's guard was truly down. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a weary but gentle smile. Turning to face him, I said, "Much better, thank you. I think I was just exhausted from the heat and the stress of the car breaking down." Being held by you last night really helped me relax. I uttered the words smoothly, looking directly into his deep-set eyes. I saw his pupils dilate slightly, a microscopic flicker of satisfaction that lasted less than a tenth of a second passing through them. He believed me. He truly believed his perfect facade was still intact. That's good, Ethan smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from my forehead. I'll have Mom make you some ginger tea to settle your stomach. You should stay home and rest today. Don't go into the studio. I'll handle everything. Okay, whatever you say, I replied, my voice meek and obedient. He threw back the covers, got out of bed, and headed for the bathroom. The moment the door clicked shut and the shower started running, the smile vanished from my face. My features went slack, freezing into a waxen mask. I sat up and stared at the empty space where he had just been lying, the indentation from his body still visible on the sheets. I slowly raised my hand, looking at my fingers as they trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the suppressed ecstasy of a rage so intense it had turned to ice. I went to the downstairs bathroom to wash up, leaving him the upstairs. The cold water on my face made me feel more alert than ever. In the mirror, a stranger stared back at me. Her eyes no longer held their usual gentle, patient look. They were now deep, sharp, black holes. When I entered the kitchen, my mother-in-law, Margaret, was already seated at the table. She was dressed in another silk pantsuit, this one a garish shade of crimson, her hair sprayed into a rigid helmet despite the early hour. She was scrolling through her phone, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Seeing me, she tossed the phone onto the table with a sharp clack. Her eyes raked over me, filled with their usual disdain. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Must be nice to be a daughter-in-law in this house. Just wait for your mother-in-law to serve you breakfast in bed. Her shrill voice echoed in the quiet kitchen. On any other day, a comment like this would have had me stammering apologies, rushing to heat up food to appease her. But today, her words were just meaningless noise. I knew this bitterness wasn't just the crabbiness of an old woman. It was part of the psychological manipulation campaign she and her son had long ago agreed upon. They wanted me in a constant state of self-doubt and guilt, to feel indebted to this family, so I would continue to be their compliant workhorse. I walked to the refrigerator and took out a carton of milk, my voice flat. I had a stomach bug last night. I was up all night. Ethan told me to rest. Margaret snorted, her lips turning down in a sneer. Sick, always sick, so delicate. My Ethan works himself to the bone out in the real world to provide for this family. You don't hear him complaining. You were lucky to marry him. You should be taking care of yourself so you can serve your husband and child, not acting like a spoiled princess. I didn't respond, just quietly poured the milk. My silence seemed to annoy her. She was about to launch into another tirade when Ethan's heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. He came down, dressed in a sharp gray suit, his tie perfectly knotted. He looked so handsome, so respectable, the image of a successful, family-oriented man. Mom, what are you yelling about so early in the morning? Amelia's not feeling well, Ethan said in a placating tone, pulling out a chair next to her. Margaret glanced at her son, her expression softening immediately, but she spoke loudly for my benefit. I'm just reminding her of her duties. A woman needs to know how to run a household. Anyway, eat your breakfast. You'll be late for work. Oh, did you talk to her about the papers from yesterday? My hand, holding the glass of milk, froze midair. A jolt went through me. Papers? What papers? Ethan rubbed his temples, feigning exhaustion and reluctance. He looked at me, his eyes full of a sincerity so fake it was nauseating. I was going to talk to you tonight, honey, but since Mom brought it up. The thing is, my company has a huge opportunity, a project that could change our lives. We need to raise capital fast. If this deal goes through, we're set. I'll buy us that big house in the countryside you've always wanted. I slowly put the glass down and pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from them. What kind of project needs that much capital? My studio had a good month. I can pull out some cash. It's more than that, Amelia, Ethan interrupted, his voice dropping to a serious tone. A lot more. I've already spoken with the bank. They've agreed to the loan, but on one condition." He paused, his eyes boring into mine. "What condition?" I asked, my voice a fabricated tremor, my eyes wide and innocent like a lamb's. "They need significant collateral. This house, which is in both our names, plus that plot of land your parents left you, I want us to mortgage it all. The bank has the paperwork ready. All we need is your signature." Margaret immediately jumped in, her voice aggressive and overpowering. "See, your husband is making big moves for this family, for you and Leo. A wife's job is to support her husband. That piece of land is just sitting there doing nothing. Hand over the deed so Ethan can build our future. Stop being so selfish." My mind felt like it had been plunged into an ice cellar. Everything became horrifyingly clear. The land from my parents was the only asset I had left that was solely mine. It was my last resort, my safety net. He wanted to take that too. He wanted it so that when my car plunged off a cliff, when I was a burned corpse, all our assets, from the house to my inheritance, would be tied up as collateral for a business loan that he controlled. No disputes, no legal mess. A flawlessly cruel plan. He was going to bleed me dry before leading me to the slaughter. Can I see the papers?" I mumbled, looking down to hide the firestorm of hatred in my eyes. Ethan quickly pulled a thick stack of professionally printed documents from his briefcase. He placed them on the table and slid them toward me, along with a blue ballpoint pen. "You just need to sign where I've marked with a pencil, X. I've handled all the other details. Trust me, Amelia. In 3 months, once the project cash flow stabilizes, I'll pay off the loan and get the deeds back." His voice was as smooth and soothing as a lullaby. I shakily flipped through the pages. Unbelievable numbers, loan guarantee agreements. The primary person responsible for repayment, through some convoluted legal jargon, was me. He had bribed a contact at the bank to bend the rules and set a trap for his own wife. The air in the kitchen was thick with anticipation. 2 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, like vultures waiting to pick a carcass clean. Just then, tentative footsteps came from the stairs. Leo appeared, my 8-year-old boy, in his superhero pajamas, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. His face was pale, his eyes slightly swollen. He hadn't slept well. His gaze flickered between the 3 adults before landing on me. A raw fear flashed in his young eyes, as he remembered the terror of the previous day, the premonition that had made him beg me not to go home. "Leo, come here," I called softly, holding out my hand. He obediently came over and crawled into my lap, wrapping his arms tightly around my waist. He didn't look at his father. He didn't greet his grandmother. A child's abnormal behavior is the truest reflection of a toxic family environment. Margaret's brow furrowed. She slammed her hand on the glass table, making the teacups rattle. "This disrespectful brat. Doesn't he know how to greet his elders in the morning? Is this how you're raising him? To be a rude, ungrateful child?" she shrieked. Leo flinched, burying his face in my chest. He was trembling. "Mommy, I'm scared," he whispered, so quietly, only I could hear. "Scared of what?" Margaret shot up from her chair and stomped over. She grabbed Leo's small arm and yanked him out of my lap. The force was so strong he lost his balance and fell sideways onto the cold tile floor. His teddy bear flew out of his arms. "Ow!" Leo cried out. A loud snap echoed in my head. The cord of my self-control, stretched taut since last night, finally broke. I lunged forward, scooping Leo up, shielding him from the dark shadow of my mother-in-law. I whipped my head up, my eyes sharp as daggers, and stared directly at Margaret. For the first time in 7 years of marriage, I looked at her like a mother animal ready to tear apart anything that touched her young. "What are you doing? He's a child. What did he do to deserve that?" My voice was a low growl, filled with a menace that made Margaret flinch and take a step back. But she quickly recovered her arrogance, planting her hands on her hips. Well, the little mouse has found her tongue. I am teaching my grandson discipline. What business is it of yours? You're spoiling him into a disrespectful little monster. His own father is right there, and he acts like he doesn't exist. Like mother, like son, ungrateful wretches. I turned to look at Ethan. He hadn't moved. He had no intention of helping his son up. He sat with his arms crossed, his expression cold, a contemptuous smirk playing on his lips. He was watching, using his mother to break my will, to force me into submission. "Don't overreact, Amelia," Ethan finally said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Mom is just teaching him a lesson. You're too soft on him. Now, calm him down. This noise is giving me a headache. Then come back and sign the papers. I'm going to be late for work." He didn't care if his son was hurt. He only cared about the mortgage documents. He only cared about finalizing the paperwork to get the money, to legally strip me of everything before he killed me. Looking at the tears streaming down my son's red cheek, at the cold indifference of the man I once loved, and at the murderous rage on my mother-in-law's face, the blood in my veins first boiled, then instantly froze into sharp shards of ice. This was the limit, the breaking point. For 7 years, I had mistaken my patience for sacrifice. I had deluded myself that if I just tried a little harder, was a little more obedient, a little more yielding, this family would be peaceful, and my son would have a complete childhood. But no, my patience only fed their cruelty. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a tool, a pawn, a sacrifice. If I continued to be weak, the person in the coffin tomorrow wouldn't just be me. It might be my little boy as well. They wouldn't spare Leo, because he was the sole legal heir to my remaining assets. A man like Ethan, once he'd decided to murder his wife, wouldn't hesitate to discard his own child to make way for his mistress and their new family. A cold, dark, but immensely powerful energy surged through me. I stroked Leo's hair and kissed his forehead. "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy's here. No one can hurt you," I whispered. Then I slowly stood up. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall over my face to hide my eyes. When I looked up again, the sharp glare was gone, replaced by a tear-streaked face, my shoulders shaking, the very picture of a broken, defeated woman. A perfect performance must be played to the very end. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Ethan," I sobbed, stumbling back to the table. "I was just so worried about Leo. I wasn't thinking. Please don't be mad at me." Margaret tilted her head back, letting out a triumphant snort. She was used to winning these psychological battles. She thought that last blow had completely crushed my last bit of resistance. Ethan sighed softly and patted the table next to the stack of papers. "It's all right. I'm not angry. Women are emotional. I get it. Come, sit down. Sign these, and I promise I'll take you and Leo to Six Flags this weekend." I collapsed into the chair, wiping my tears with my sleeve. My hand reached out, trembling, and picked up the blue pen. "All the places with an X, right?" I asked again. My voice choked, pretending I couldn't comprehend the complex terms. "That's right. Good girl. Just sign your full name on each page for me." Ethan leaned in close. The smell of his cologne mixed with the stench of his lies filled my nostrils. He was watching my every move. I put the pen to the paper. The scratching of the nib was the only sound. Amelia Rose Miller. My name appeared on the page. Every signature was another nail in the coffin of this marriage. Every stroke of the pen was a knife I was sharpening in my mind. Ethan watched my hand, his eyes gleaming. As I signed the final page, the power of attorney document, I saw out of the corner of my eye his chest rise and fall in a sigh of relief. "It's done," I said, pushing the stack of documents toward him. I let my hands fall into my lap and hung my head, as if every last ounce of my strength had been drained. Like a hawk, Ethan snatched the papers, flipping through to check the signatures. A smile he could no longer contain spread across his face, his first genuine smile since this all began. The smile of a victor claiming his prize. "That's my girl. You're the best. You just rest today, okay?" Ethan shoved the documents into his briefcase and zipped it shut. He stood up, adjusted his tie. He didn't even glance at Leo, who was huddled in the corner of the kitchen. "Mom, keep an eye on her. I'm heading to work," he said to Margaret. "All right. Drive safe. Focus on the deal. Don't let this womanly nonsense distract you," Margaret replied, her eyes following her son with pride. The sound of the garage door opening, then the car engine starting and fading into the distance. The house fell back into a terrifying silence. Margaret shot me one last venomous look before waddling upstairs and slamming her bedroom door. Only Leo and I remained in the cold kitchen. I walked over to my son and lifted him into my arms. He buried his head in my shoulder, his arms wrapped tightly around my neck. He wasn't crying anymore, but his body was still trembling. "Mommy," Leo whispered, his warm breath on my neck. "Daddy is mean. Grandma is mean too. Can we please not live here anymore?" The words of an 8-year-old child, so pure, so true, and as sharp as a sword, pierced through my last illusion. A child's sensitivity had seen through the human masks worn by these devils, something I, a grown woman, had been blindly ignoring for years. I tightened my hug, a cold, mirthless smile forming on my lips. The tears had stopped flowing long ago, replaced by a profound mental stillness. "You're right, my love. We won't live here anymore," I whispered back, my voice as calm and hard as steel. "But before we go, Mommy has to take out the trash." Ethan thought he held my death sentence with those mortgage papers and the sabotaged car. He and his wicked mother thought they were the masters of this game. But they didn't know that when a woman is pushed to the edge, stripped of her hope, and her child's safety is threatened, she doesn't run. She turns and becomes a beast 1,000 times more ruthless than them. I carried Leo upstairs, back to our bedroom. I set him on the bed and opened the closet. My eyes scanned the expensive clothes Ethan bought me to show off to the world. I stopped at the bottom drawer, where I kept old personal documents. The game of survival was only just beginning. Ethan had made his move. Now, it was my turn to show my hand. I would let him climb to the very peak of his triumph, and then I would cut the rope myself and watch him fall. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs tasted of vengeance. Every preparation, no matter how small, had to be calculated with the precision of a guillotine. No mistakes, no mercy. Step by step, piece of evidence by piece of evidence, I would peel off their righteous skin and expose the rotten core of this family for the world to see. And I knew exactly where to start. The false bottom of the wooden drawer released a faint, musty smell, the scent of forgotten memories and buried secrets. My fingers brushed past old wedding albums, feeling for the seam in the velvet lining. I pressed down firmly on the back right corner. A soft click, and the panel popped up, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment I had secretly commissioned a carpenter to build 3 years ago. The day I had caught Ethan staring at his phone with a guilty intensity, quickly shutting it off when I walked in. A woman's intuition had told me then to prepare an escape route, even as I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Now, that paranoia was my lifeline. Inside were a burner phone, a tiny digital voice recorder, a USB drive with copies of all my personal documents, and an envelope of cash. They had waited in the dark for 3 years, patiently waiting for this day. I took out the phone and the recorder and plugged them in to charge. A small red light began to blink, faint but steady, just like the beat of my own heart, cold, mechanical, devoid of warmth. I turned to Leo, who was still sitting on the bed, watching me with wide, curious eyes. I went to him, smoothed his hair, and smiled a smile that took all my willpower to appear serene. "Leo, my sweet boy." I put a large pair of noise-canceling headphones over his ears and connected them to his iPad. "Mommy's putting on a movie for you. Today, we're going to play a game called The Silent Spy. From now until I take these off, you can't remove them, and you can't talk. Just focus on your movie. If you do a good job, tomorrow Mommy will take you somewhere far away and beautiful. Deal?" Leo blinked and nodded obediently. The cartoon's theme song began to play, isolating him from the murderous atmosphere of the house. I looked at him for a second longer, engraving the image of his small shoulders into my memory. He was the only thing keeping me sane, the only thing stopping me from grabbing a kitchen knife and running upstairs to deal with that venomous old woman. I stood up and walked to Ethan's desk. The expensive leather chair still smelled of his cologne and body odor, a mixture that now made my stomach churn. I turned on his MacBook. He was arrogant, thinking I was a technologically illiterate housewife. He had no idea that 5 months ago, after he'd passed out drunk, I had installed a keylogger program on his laptop, hidden as a fake system file. I typed in the password. Not our anniversary, not Leo's birthday. It was Chloe 1995. The name and birth year of the mistress he'd been keeping for 2 years. The depravity of some men is revealed in the most brazenly stupid details. The screen lit up, casting a blue glow on my impassive face. I opened the keylogger software, extracted all his saved passwords and typing history. I logged into his web-based messaging apps, his personal email, his iCloud account. My hand moved the mouse with the speed of a pre-programmed machine. No tears, no heartache, just the chilling silence of someone gathering evidence for a death sentence. Hidden folders opened. The chat logs between him and Chloe appeared. Chloe, when is that old hag going to sign the mortgage papers? This pregnancy is exhausting. Are you going to let our son be born before I have the deed to a new house in my name? Ethan, soon, baby. I've got the paperwork ready, and my mom forced her signature. All she has to do is drive that car upstate tomorrow for that client meeting I set up. Then it's all over. The assets will be mine, and you can move in as the lady of the house. My pupils contracted. Drive that car upstate. The words hit me like a physical blow. He didn't just want me out. He wanted me dead. A perfect car accident on a winding mountain road. I was a nervous driver. If the brakes failed on a sharp turn, the car would fly off the road. He would become the tragic, grieving widower, collecting the life insurance policy and legally seizing all the mortgaged assets. A chill ran down my spine. The anger was gone, replaced by a permanent glacier in my chest. I plugged in the USB drive and began copying everything. The message histories, the ultrasound photos of Chloe's baby, call recordings he'd saved from business deals, and the massive wire transfer receipts showing he'd embezzled from our joint accounts to buy her a luxury condo. Every byte of data was another nail in this family's coffin. When I was done, I erased all traces of my access, shut down the computer, and pushed the chair back to its original position. It was now 10:30 a.m. From upstairs, Margaret's rhythmic, dry snores began to echo down the hallway. She always took a nap after her morning soap operas. The window between 10:30 and 11:30 was when she slept the deepest. I slipped the burner phone into my pocket and took off my slippers. My bare feet made no sound on the cold marble floor as I ascended the stairs. Standing before her door, I held my breath. The smell of menthol rub and old age hit me. My hand closed around the brass doorknob. I knew this lock had a slight catch. I turned it with excruciating slowness, pushing the door open a crack. She was on the bed, mouth agape, wheezing. The room was dark, the curtains drawn. My eyes scanned the room and landed on the oak chest in the corner. That's where she kept all her important documents. I moved like a ghost. Her keys were in the pocket of the housecoat, hanging on a hook by the bathroom. I crept over, carefully extracted the key ring, and returned to the chest. The smallest key fit the lock on the bottom drawer, a soft click. Inside, I found what I was looking for, a plastic document holder containing the deed to our house. The largest asset my parents had helped me acquire, but which I had foolishly allowed Ethan to add his name to. Clipped to it was a mortgage agreement for a bank loan of $8 million. I carefully pulled out the paper and turned to the last page. My signature, Amelia R. Miller, was there in the mortgagor section, a perfect forgery. But I could see a tiny hesitation, a small blot of ink at the tail of the R, where the forger had pressed too hard to mimic my style. He and his mother had hired someone to forge my signature and conspired with a branch manager at the bank, a friend of Ethan's, to bypass the in-person verification. I took out the burner phone and, using the silent camera function, began photographing the document, especially the forged signature and the notary's seal. But there was more. Deep in the back of the drawer, under a piece of velvet, was an old leather-bound journal, Margaret's. I opened it. The spidery handwriting revealed a depravity that shattered any last shred of humanity I might have ascribed to her. June 12. Chloe's ultrasound showed a boy. He looks just like Ethan, thank God. Must push Ethan to deal with the wife. Can't risk her finding out. June 20. Saw the psychic. She said, "This month is auspicious for a funeral. Ethan has found a mechanic. Just needs to sever the brake line part way. God, please grant Amelia's soul a peaceful passage. Don't let her haunt this house. It's not our fault her fate is to die young." Prayers for a peaceful death mixed with plans for murder. She was praying to God to bless her son's evil deeds. My blood turned to ice. Nausea rose in my throat so violently I had to bite my lip until it bled to keep from retching. The taste of blood brought me back. I flipped through the pages, photographing every entry. This was no longer a divorce case. This was evidence of a conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. I put everything back exactly as I found it, locked the chest, returned the keys, and slipped out of the room. By the time I was back downstairs, my shirt was soaked with cold sweat. But I had no time to rest. The next step, the car. I went to the garage. The white SUV sat silently in the dim light, sleek and cold like a steel coffin. Yesterday, Ethan had said he'd had it serviced in preparation for my trip. I put a burner SIM in my phone and dialed Gus. Gus was a mechanic who owned a small garage on the outskirts of town. My father had once saved his life by paying for his daughter's heart surgery. He'd always treated me like a little sister, even though Ethan forbade me from associating with greasy blue-collar types. "Amelia, is that you?" Gus's gruff voice came through the speaker. "Gus, I need you to bring your mobile toolkit to my house right now. Come to the back gate, don't ring the bell. This is top secret." "My life and Leo's depend on you," I said, my voice sharp and urgent. Less than 30 minutes later, Gus was at the back of the garage, dressed in oily overalls. Seeing my pale face, he didn't ask questions, just nodded. "Check the entire braking system, especially the hydraulic lines under the chassis," I instructed, pointing to the SUV. Gus slid under the car on a creeper with a powerful flashlight. For 10 agonizingly long minutes, the only sounds were the clinking of metal tools and his heavy breathing. When he slid back out, his weathered face was ashen. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shock and fury. "Amelia, who the hell did this?" he hissed through his teeth. "The rear left brake line has been deliberately sawed at. It's not cut all the way through, just the outer layer. Driving around town, you wouldn't notice. But at high speed, on a downhill slope, if you pump the brakes a couple of times, the pressure would burst the line. Total brake failure. The police would just think the old line ruptured under pressure." I closed my eyes. The scenario was terrifyingly perfect. "Gus," I said, opening my eyes and looking straight at him. "I need you to take my phone, get back under there, and record a video. Shine the light on the cut and explain, in your professional opinion, exactly how this was done and what the result would be. State today's date and time." Gus immediately took my phone, slid back under the car, and did exactly as I asked. The 3-minute video was crystal clear, showing every detail of the cut made by a specialized tool, accompanied by his expert testimony that this was intentional sabotage. "Now what? Should I call the cops?" Gus asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "No," I said coldly. "If we call them now, he'll deny everything, blame the service center. I need him to walk into the trap himself." "Gus, do you have a spare brake line?" "Yeah." "Replace it. Use an older-looking one so it doesn't look new. Clean up any spilled fluid. Make the car perfectly safe to drive. But make it look like nothing's been touched." Gus stared at me, a flicker of understanding and fear in his eyes. He nodded grimly and got to work. When he left through the back gate, the car was safe. Ethan thought he had set a time bomb. He didn't know I had already disarmed it, and it was about to blow up in his face. I returned to the house and set the final stage. I took the 2 tiny voice recorders. One, I taped securely under the heavy coffee table in the living room, where Ethan and Margaret always had their evening chats. The other, I placed under his desk in the office. Both were set to voice activation mode, with enough battery for 7 days. The net was cast. Now for the hardest part, the performance. 6 p.m. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stew he liked, the knife hitting the cutting board with a steady, rhythmic thud. As he walked in, I took a deep breath. I relaxed my facial muscles, slumped my shoulders slightly, adopting the posture of a tired, submissive wife. "You're home," I said without turning around, my voice soft and a little shaky. Ethan came into the kitchen and draped his blazer over a chair. He walked up behind me. The cheap perfume of his mistress still lingered on his shirt collar, masked by his own cologne. "Yeah. Everything okay at home? Did you pack for your trip tomorrow?" he asked, his tone concerned, but his eyes were sharp, scrutinizing my every expression. "I'm all packed," I replied, turning around but keeping my head down to avoid his gaze. "I'll leave around 6 a.m. to avoid the morning fog on the mountain pass." "Good. Drive safe. Just get the contract signed and come straight back. No dawdling." He patted my shoulder. His touch felt like a snake slithering over my skin. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from flinching. Dinner was as suffocating as ever. Margaret complained about my cooking. "This stew is bland." "Did we run out of salt?" she sneered. "I'll get the salt shaker, Mom," I said, quietly getting up. "Go ahead and eat," I thought, looking at them. "Savor it. This is your last peaceful meal on this earth." That night, after cleaning up, I took Leo to bed. Ethan said he had to finish some work in his office. I knew he was calling her, and the recorder under his desk was capturing every lustful word, every vile plot. I pulled a pre-packed duffel bag from under the bed. It didn't contain clothes. It contained our passports, Leo's birth certificate, my mother's jewelry, my personal laptop, and the USB drive with all the evidence. I lay down next to Leo. He was fast asleep. I wrapped my arm around him, a protective wall. The clock showed 3 a.m. 3 more hours? 3 hours, until I would get into that death trap of a car and drive away. Ethan and Margaret would watch me go, convinced they were sending me to my death. They would smile, waiting for the call from the state police. But they didn't know the woman they had trampled on was already gone, replaced by the mother who had been awakened by a child's desperate whisper. Tomorrow, I would not die. Tomorrow, the curtain would fall, and they would be the ones taking the plunge. 4 a.m. The air in the bedroom was a solid, cold block. My eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling where pale stripes of light from the street lamp cut through the darkness like blades. Leo's breathing beside me was the only peaceful sound in this hell. I slowly extracted my arm from under his head, pins and needles shooting down to my fingertips. I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood. The chill grounded me, sharpened my mind. I looked at myself in the vanity mirror. A stranger stared back. Her eyes were hollowed, but a cold light glowed within them, like embers fanned into a low, steady flame. The weak, submissive woman was truly dead, buried by their own hands. All that remained was a mother armed with the most brutal survival instinct. 5:15 a.m. I went to the closet, not for clothes, but to pull out a medium-sized suitcase I had packed 3 days ago and hidden under a pile of winter blankets. The duffel bag was a prop for Ethan to see, to make him believe I was going on a normal business trip. This suitcase held my real life, crucial legal documents, asset transfer papers my lawyer had already finalized, and my mother's last remaining mementos. I returned to the bed and gently shook Leo. "Leo, honey, time to wake up." My voice was a soft whisper. He stirred, his sleepy eyes fluttering open. "Is it morning, Mommy?" "Not yet. But our game starts now," I smiled, a smile that took every muscle in my face to maintain. "Today we're playing spies. Remember the rules? Absolute silence. Do exactly as I say." He nodded, childish excitement lighting up his eyes as I dressed him in a windbreaker and sneakers. My heart ached. His absolute trust was both my greatest weapon and my strongest shield. 5:45 a.m. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, took Leo's hand, and opened the bedroom door. The house was dark, except for the dim light from the kitchen. Ethan was up. He was meticulous. He had to be there to see me off, to ensure his prey didn't escape. As I led Leo down the stairs, Ethan emerged from the kitchen, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. He was in silk pajamas, his hair artfully messy to look like he'd just woken up for me. But I could see the tension in the lines around his eyes, the way his pupils darted from me to Leo to the duffel bag. "You're up early. Why is Leo awake?" His voice was a forced warmth. "I'm dropping him at my sister's for a few days. The trip might take longer than I thought, and Grandma's arthritis acts up," I replied, my voice flat, avoiding his gaze by pretending to fix Leo's collar. "Oh. Okay. Well, drive safe." He put his coffee down and pulled the keys to the white SUV from his pocket. The keys to the car he'd spent all afternoon checking the oil on. Here you go. I checked the tires and fluids. Take it easy on the pass. They're saying it's foggy. I took the keys. Our fingers brushed. His were ice cold and clammy. He was nervous. The murderer was counting down the seconds. The jagged edges of the key dug into my palm, a sharp reminder of this cruel reality. Just then, a door creaked open upstairs. Margaret appeared on the landing, wrapped in a thin robe, her face alight with ill-concealed glee. If you're going, then go. Stop dawdling and making a racket. Some of us are trying to sleep, she snapped, before turning and disappearing back into her room. Yes, Mom. Go back to sleep, I said, my voice dripping with my final act of filial piety. Sleep well, you wicked woman. It's the last peaceful rest you'll get. 6 a.m. I opened the garage door. The smell of damp concrete and gasoline hit me. The white SUV waited silently, a predator in the dark. I put Leo in his car seat, buckling him in securely. Through the rear-view mirror, I saw Ethan standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his eyes glued to the car. He pressed the remote. The rusted gate screeched open. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. I shifted into drive and slowly released the brake. The car rolled out of the garage, across the driveway, and onto the street. In one final glance in the rearview mirror, I saw Ethan. A small, cruel, triumphant smirk touched his lips just before the gate slid shut, trapping him inside the cage he thought was his castle. The car moved down the silent, misty street. I didn't accelerate, letting it coast. My heart hammered against my ribs. I counted 100 yards, 200, 300. As soon as I rounded the corner onto a side street, I slammed the gear shift into park and pulled the handbrake. I killed the engine. Everything was precise, mechanical. At the corner, a black pickup truck and a marked police cruiser were already waiting. A man in a trench coat got out and walked toward me. It was Mr. Davies, the lawyer I had contacted 3 days ago. With him were 3 police officers and a uniformed auto technician. I rolled down the window. "You're safe now," Mr. Davies said grimly. The technician immediately slid under my SUV. Less than 3 minutes later, he emerged, his face smudged with grease, but his eyes wide. He looked at the police captain and nodded. "Captain, the report is confirmed. The brake line was deliberately sawed. The cut is clean, leaving only a thin membrane of the inner tubing intact. At speeds over 40 miles an hour, or after 2 or 3 hard applications of the brake pedal, the hydraulic pressure would cause a catastrophic rupture. Total brake failure. This was not wear and tear. This was sabotage." Even though I knew, hearing it confirmed sent a chill through my bones. They truly wanted me dead, in the most horrific way imaginable. All for money. "Thank you. Document the scene," the captain ordered, then turned to me. "Ma'am, you and your son can wait here while we secure the evidence." "No." I opened the car door and stood on the cold asphalt, my feet planted firmly. "My lawyer will take my son to safety. I'm going back to that house. This play needs a finale." The captain looked at me with a mixture of concern and respect. He nodded. "We'll be right behind you. Give us the signal, and we're coming in." I leaned into the car and hugged Leo. "You go with Mr. Davies, sweetie. He's going to take you for pancakes. Mommy has to finish some work, and then I'll come get you, and we'll go on a very long trip." "Okay, Mommy," he said, giving me a tight hug. His warmth was my fuel. I stood up, turned, and walked back the way I came. 6:35 a.m. I stood before the iron gate. I used my spare key to open the side entrance and stepped into the yard. The house was deceptively peaceful. I pushed open the unlocked front door. The air reeked of cigarette smoke. Ethan was on the sofa, a phone pressed to his ear, a disgusting, gleeful laugh rumbling in his chest. "It's done, baby. The stupid bitch just drove off. She'll be at the mountain pass in about 2 hours. Get your pretty dress ready. The second I get the call, I'm coming to pick you up to celebrate. Yeah, the life insurance is $15 million. The house, all of it, I'll put it in your name." As for my old hag of a mother, I'll toss her a few bucks and she'll shut up. From the kitchen, Margaret emerged, munching on an apple, her face flushed with excitement. I stood silently in the doorway, my shadow stretching across the floor, falling over Ethan's expensive shoes. It was Margaret who saw me first. The apple dropped from her hand, her face went white, her mouth hung open. "You! How? Are you a ghost?" she stammered, stumbling backward. Ethan turned, annoyed. "Mom, what the hell are you?" He stopped. The phone slipped from his hand. He shot to his feet, his face draining of all color, turning a pasty, ashen gray. "Amelia? Did you forget something?" He choked out, trying to smile, a grotesque grimace on his frozen lips. I didn't answer. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the coffee table. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was like a drumbeat of doom. I opened my duffel bag. First, I threw down the stack of legal documents. The asset freeze, the proof of his embezzlement, the transfer of my company shares into a trust for Leo. "What is this? What have you done?" he roared, his fear turning to fury. He lunged at me. I pulled out the second item, the tiny black voice recorder from under his desk. I hit play. His voice and Chloe's filled the room. "Cut the brake line just enough. A few hard brakes and it'll burst. The cops will rule it an accident and will be $15 million richer." The recording ended with their shared, sickening laughter. Ethan froze, his arm dropping limply to his side. He collapsed onto the sofa. Margaret fell to the floor, grabbing at my legs, sobbing. "Amelia, please! I didn't know." It was him. It was that harlot. "I'm an old woman. Have mercy." I looked down at her with utter contempt and kicked my leg free. "Mercy? You watched him sabotage my car from your window. You told him to clean up the spilled brake fluid. Did you forget? The hidden camera in the garage didn't." I took out my phone and made a call. "You can come in now." Seconds later, police sirens wailed, and flashing red and blue lights filled the room. The door burst open. "Ethan Miller, Margaret Miller," the captain's voice boomed. "You are under arrest for the conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. The evidence from the vehicle has been secured." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the room. Ethan didn't resist, just stared at me with dead, hollow eyes. He had lost. Utterly. Margaret shrieked and fainted but was hauled to her feet by two officers. I turned my back on the filthy mess. I walked upstairs, to the bedroom where I had endured so much pain. I pulled my real suitcase from under the bed. As I walked back down, the wheels of the suitcase clicked on each step, a steady, final rhythm. The sound of a life ending and another beginning. I walked past Ethan as he was being led away. I didn't look at him. He was already dead to me. I stepped out of the iron gate. The morning sun was bright and warm, burning away the cold mist. The air smelled clean, of freedom. Down the street, Mr. Davies's car was waiting. Through the window, I could see Leo, waving, a brilliant, angelic smile on his face. His innocent whisper had saved us, and in doing so, had buried the devils who wore human skin. I pulled my suitcase, lifted my head, and walked toward the light. My new life, and my son's, was just beginning.